But just to let you know, and I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation. It is my goal that the presentation should last, oh, hey Jim. Presentation should last hopefully around half an hour, with plenty of time for questions. We can take questions from people who are here in person and also people who are at home. All right, so just to kind of give you a sense of the key topics that I want to cover tonight, just a little bit of rehearsing where we are for, so I want to go over a little bit about refugee resettlement in the United States more broadly. A quick, as far as I could get the information, rehearsal of how we got to today and where we are with the current crisis. What's happening right now in Berkshire County, and I have information that's kind of hot off the presses. And then talk a little bit about what we can do to help, and then hopefully some next steps for us as individuals and as a parish. Time out, yes? Sorry, I can't hear you. Hold on, again, technical issues, so not quite sure why that's not working. Just a second, let me see.
What's that? Thank you. We have a
Could you try that again, Bernadette?
20 people confirmed for Thursday.
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, everyone looks good. Thank you for the reminder.
We could.
All right.
One way away at the time.
Now we can get started. All right. So the obvious caveats, I am not a specialist in immigration issues. You're getting the best information I can provide. I'll give as best answers as I can. And when in doubt, I will funnel you over to the people who actually know what they're doing. So I will not hesitate to say I don't know the answer. Okay. So refugee resettlement in the United States. The United States, since time immemorial, has been the most welcoming country in the world. That is until 2018, when we were overtaken by Canada. So Canada now takes more refugees than the United States. So our high water mark was in 1993, where we welcomed 143,000 refugees, mostly as a result of the Balkan Wars. From there, it dropped to about 70 to 90,000 refugees per year. The cap was raised to 110,000 in 2017 as a response to the Syrian refugee crisis. But as we all know, with the change of administration, that was subsequently reduced. It declined precipitously, went to 50,000 in 2015, and we hit a low water mark in 2020. The legal cap was 15,000 refugees, but only 12,000 were actually resettled in the United States. This is actually important, and I'll get to why that's important in a moment. That's people who are coming as official refugees, and that has a particular legal status, a particular visa status, and those folks come with a package of benefits to help them actually resettle. Now, in addition to that, there are other people who emigrate to the United States who need our help as neighbors. And just as a data point, 46,500 people came as asylum seekers in 2019. That's the most current year that we have for asylum seeker data. That's kind of just more general. Now, part of the reason why that's important is because there are only 9 agencies and organizations that are legally approved by the United States government to help with refugee resettlement. And here they all are. Now, for our purposes, there are actually 3 that are really significant. You will notice the Episcopal Church is actually one of those. That's the purple one in the corner. The Episcopal Church is Episcopal Migration Ministries. Now, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops is one of those agencies, but it's not the bishops doing it. It's Catholic Charities, which is a subsidiary of, because the Roman Catholics do everything hierarchically, so everything floats up to the USCCB. So when you read in the papers, it won't say the USCCB is resettling, it will say Catholic Charities. Another one is the Hebrew International Aid Society. We know them as Jewish Family Services. So the big international organization is HIAS. They are the national and international organization. They farm it out to local regional authorities. In our case, that will be Jewish Family Services of Western Massachusetts, based in Springfield. The third agency which is active in Massachusetts is the Lutheran Immigrant and Refugee, I forget what the S stands for, probably Society, let's go with that. Again, you won't ever see any news reports saying LIRS. You'll hear about an agency called Accentria. So the Lutherans rebranded their charities organization, Accentria, to make it sound less faith-based, basically. And then one more that I just want to throw in here because I think it's great. The Ethiopian Community Development Council. And that was actually founded to help resettle folks from Ethiopia during the famine in the mid-'80s. I just thought that was kind of hilarious that they're still kicking around as an international aid agency. But in Massachusetts, the three agencies which are doing resettlement work are Catholic Charities, Jewish Family Services, and Accentria. Okay. Now, I brought up the overarching kind of where we are with resettlement and asylum seeking because those 9 aid agencies were staffed based on how many refugees are coming. You know, it's a function of how much work there is to do, which in turn drives how much fundraising they can do and what kinds of access to funds they have. So they were anticipating welcoming 110,000 refugees in 2017, and they staffed accordingly. When that disappeared, they reduced their staff significantly in order to meet what was the actual presence. And then suddenly they all got a phone call saying, hey, we need you to resettle 100,000 refugees from Afghanistan in 4 months. So, if you happen to call Jewish Family Services and they don't return your phone call, that's why. That basically their work has increased by approximately a factor of 10 overnight. So they are, and so all this stuff with the 100,000, actually it's 95,000 refugees from Afghanistan is on top of the work that they were already doing with folks from the southern border, or, I mean, Syria is still a serious issue, plus all of the other areas. There's refugees coming from the conflict with Ethiopia and Eritrea. There's problems all over the place. And these are the only 9 agencies doing this in the United States. Actually, I want to go back for just a second. Just also want to note that the Ethiopian Community Development Corporation, the International Rescue Committee, World Relief, and the U.S. Committee. So over half of those 5 out of the 9 agencies are all faith-based agencies, just in case we need to feel better about ourselves. Oh, CWS is Church World Service. So the staffing is really pretty small. Now for what we're looking at again, Catholic Charities, Accentria, Jewish Family Services. Those are the 3 biggies. Episcopal Migration Ministries does not have a presence in Massachusetts. Okay. So, how do we get here? The airlifts from Kabul were on August 15th, which is really, that was like 10 minutes ago. After the airlifts, the evacuees were taken to military bases around the world. There was a very large tent city constructed at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, and they kind of hung out there for a while. Now, in October and November, there was an effort to move those folks again into the United States, and they were relocated to domestic military bases. I've got a picture of one in a moment. Towards the end of November and into December, the actual resettlement in communities began. So we're at the very beginning stages of that now. So here's, oh, that's actually, Yeah, this is Ramstein. So they were staying in Ramstein. They're not staying there now. This is actually where they're staying now. So this is an example of one of the large kind of tent cities that's been constructed at Fort Bliss, New Mexico. So this is where they're staying now. Okay, about 95,000 total evacuees from Afghanistan are expected to be relocated and resettled in the United States. Of them, about 1,000 are expected to be resettled in Massachusetts, 400 in western Massachusetts, and approximately 60 in Berkshire County. It doesn't seem like a lot, but each of these families, each of these individuals has gone through an incredible experience, incredible amount of dislocation and trauma, and each of them is going to need a tremendous amount of support from their new neighbors. So what's happening right now in Berkshire County? If you remember, sometime back in August, Congress passed a law. And it was unclear how this was all going to work out, and Congress did. Now, I actually had a whole separate section here, and I had a conversation with the new case manager at Jewish Family Services who's based in Pittsfield. You may have heard for a while that the folks were coming under a very unusual program in the State Department. They were being called humanitarian parolees, which is basically the category for, oh my God, something really, really horrible happened. We need to get them here right now, and there's no other bucket to put them in. The great news is they are not that. They now have an official visa status. Numbers and letters were rattled off to me, but the only one that really matters is that there's an R attached to their visa designation. They're coming as refugees, as official refugees. That has really, really significant implications. Now, their visa is coming as refugees, but there's a real deeper sense to this. This is me with my civics hat on, not my priest hat. My priest hat says, these are children of God, we need to reach out to them and care for them. With my American citizen hat on, these are folks whose lives are at risk because they collaborated and worked with the American government. We have a civic responsibility to these people. This is really about fulfilling a promise. Since they're coming as official refugees, my colleague, Reverend Tina Rathman down in Great Barrington, who did a lot of work with Physical Migration Ministries, she described it this afternoon. She said this way, she said, if they're coming as refugees, they're coming with this bundle of benefits all wrapped up in a stocking. So it's still going to be really, really difficult, but it's much better situation than if they had been coming under a different visa status. So everyone who comes will be given a $1,200 relocation stipend. Now, if that's a family of 4, that starts to add up a little bit. If it's one guy who's 28, well, that's not going to go very far for an apartment in Berkshire County. They will.
Is that a monthly stipend?
Nope, one-time stipend, one-time relocation. Oh, sorry. There was a question: is that a monthly stipend? And the answer is no. That is a one-time relocation stipend. They are eligible for work permits. There's a little asterisk on the work permits. So here's the deal with the work permits. The work permits are being issued at the military bases where the folks are staying right now. So far, so good. From there, they will be mailed to Washington. From Washington, they will be mailed to Jewish Family Services in Springfield. And then from Springfield, they will be mailed to Berkshire County, or to Pittsfield. As I was talking to the case manager, who I will introduce her contact information to you all later, I said, because the immigration services have never lost paperwork that's being mailed across the country, and she laughed. So the work permits are probably going to be a little bit delayed. That means additional levels of support from us, their new neighbors. Refugee status does also mean that they will immediately be eligible for things like Social Security cards, mass health, education, all the stuff. So that's really, really, really helpful. Our new neighbors are on the way. Jewish Family Services is expecting to welcome a family to Pittsfield next week. So this is actually actively happening. They were holding off on doing some of this physical resettlement until that legal status got settled. If they had been coming under a different status, it would have been much more difficult. So they were holding off to make this work. So what can we do? Actually, this presentation is moving a little faster than I thought, so we'll have more time for questions. First thing, housing. This is a problem nationally and not just in Berkshire County. I think I'll go into each one in detail in a moment. We can raise funds, so we can find housing. We can raise funds. We can show up to help people move and do some kind of one-off things. We can work to raise money for specific big-ticket home goods. I'll go into that in a moment. The biggest commitment that someone could make would be part of a host team walking alongside one of these families that's coming into our community. Housing, the key issue, not just Berkshire County, nationally. We all know, big housing crisis right now. Clearly, permanent housing is needed. And by permanent, they're actually calling that like 1 year. So get somebody really settled. It's about getting the kids into the school. It's about breaking the cycle of dislocation. These folks have left their homes, the views that they knew, kind of everything. They've gone to Germany or Saudi Arabia. I don't even know all the places that they went. They're put up in tents. Now they're put up in new tents in the United States. Now they're coming here. You know, these parents, they want to get their kids into schools, and they don't want to have to pull them out and put them into a new school. So that's important. Temporary housing is going to be something that we're going to need. I'll at least give you the name of the case manager, so I don't keep calling her the case manager. Gabriella Sheehan is the person who was just hired by Jewish Family Services. Today was her second day on the job, and she's welcoming a family next week. So Gabriella said, you know, they're looking at people who are willing to rent for 6 months. They've got some people with, you know, in-law suites and you know, that kind of stuff. It's not pretty. But what they're trying to do is to see what the possibilities might be for more permanent housing and then find temporary housing in that same community to minimize dislocation, particularly for kids. Raising funds, which we've already been doing. $1,200 is great. Again, according to Maxine Stein, you know, if it's a family of 3, 4, 5 people, the kids also get the $1,200 stipend, so it starts to add up a little bit. It's still a drop in the bucket. According to JFS, the real magic number for kind of the initial resettlement is an additional $3,000 to $4,000. So you take whatever is the stipend, add another $3,000 to $4,000. That's really what the number is.
Is that per family or per person?
I don't know. I think it's per family because housing cost is really the key piece. So from our perspective, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, we're going to be looking to support these people at least through 2022, and possibly a little bit beyond that. Keeping a reserve to help with housing in particularly with that bridge period. So if there's a family coming next week, and that, you know, that mom and dad's work permit is based on immigration services and the United States Postal Service, they might not be working until February. So, you know, they're going to be looking to really need that housing support for rent, you know, for the next 6 to 8 weeks before any sort of work is possible. One of the things that Maxine did actually say is like basic employment is often not really the key problem. She said that most immigrants have a job within 3 weeks of being resettled. So they're willing to work and to kind of work whatever is available. So that's, again, that doesn't, I mean, if you have one person working and they end up getting a job, gateways across the street for $20 an hour, that's not going to cover rent and food for a family of 4. There's still going to need to be support. But the immigrants and refugees in particular tend to find work pretty quickly. We can provide a pair of hands. That's another way that we could support this effort. I hate moving. Moving is, I think, again, in the best of circumstances, moving is terrible. This is not the best of circumstances. So these folks are going to need to get moved into their apartments. There's other things too. I forget the name of the organization. Gabriella was saying that one of the awesome local food farming places was willing to donate like giant piles of vegetables that could get divided up but those are going to have to be delivered, so someone's going to have to do that. The folks who are coming here, many of them probably do know how to drive and do stuff, and these aren't incompetent people, but that doesn't mean they have a car. So, sure, they could go get their license, but that still doesn't help. 3,000 to 4,000 isn't going to buy a car. So there's some issues with that. And mass transit in Berkshire County is not the most stellar thing either. So that's sort of another piece of this. So there will be other opportunities to come and do work on a Saturday or a Sunday or to kind of pop in. Oh, I see your hand burned out. I'm going to try to get through this a couple of questions later because I can't see all of these things. Helping with key home goods. So some things they're happy to take used. Furniture, a lot of furniture's fine, bed frames, that kind of stuff. Some things cannot be taken used. So mattresses, bedding, that's absolutely forbidden. So those are things that we're going to have to raise money to actually purchase new. And now we have the most involved way that we could get involved here is to be part of a host team. All of those aid agencies have different names for what these things are. I think actually Essentia, the Lutherans, came up with the best one. They call them neighborhood support teams. Because if you have an acronym, it's kind of weird to have the word of the acronym in the thing. But so this is the teams that will actually kind of help out. I was expecting more people in person and not at home, but I can email these out to you. I have here physical copies of the handout for what it would be to be involved in a host team, and I'm going to go into a lot of this in the presentation. So it's between 6 at an absolute minimum and up to about 15 people would be part of a team. 15, that means a couple of families. That's like 7 couples, basically, with some kids involved. You need one team leader who is the single point person for Jewish Family Services. So that's the one person the case manager, Gabriella, talks to. They coordinate the team, manage the schedule, single point of contact. There are 5 area leaders, they call them pathways, I think. The host teams will be meeting probably weekly in order to coordinate all of the various things that need to happen. The team leader will probably be responsible for managing the shared calendar for things like, what are all the doctor's appointments? Are there appointments with lawyers? Are there, when are the interviews happening for jobs? All the various things. The whole host team will meet periodically with Gabriella, the JFS case manager, and everyone on the host team will receive in-depth training around how to interact with folks who are going through this trauma and this crisis. The last thing we want to do is to be dumb white Westerners making the situation worse. So these guys have been through enough, and so part of what we will do, part of what people on host teams will do, is receive training on things like trauma-informed care, and how to have conversations with people who have been through this experience. The 5 pathways, the 5 areas of support. Housing. So one person is going to be, trying to, if the family that the host team is supporting moves into temporary housing, they're beating the pavement looking for permanent housing, ideally in the community where that temporary housing is, so we don't have to yank the kids out of the school. These will also be the people who, look over the lease and help to, make sure this is a good deal. Talk to the landlord, do some of that coordinating work. The people on the host teams do not have to be specialists in these areas. You don't have to be a professional in these areas. You have to be willing to kind of engage with the family and on behalf of the family. The second pathway, healthcare. I hate signing up for insurance. It's, healthcare economists can't figure out how to sign up for their own insurance. And these folks are going to be thrown in to navigate the glories of probably the mass health system. So somebody's going to have to sit down and say, okay, let's go through this and see how it's going to work. Again, you don't have to be an insurance adjuster, you don't have to be a doctor or a nurse or anything like that. You have to be willing to help these folks. You have to be able to say, don't worry about, like your kid's got an infection. Well, let's get them to the doctor, okay? Let's get the appointment scheduled. Let's get the cars ready. So it's about walking alongside people. Education. Again, I think the schools in Berkshire County are going to be great for this, but somebody's got to help them go to the school district, talk to the assistant superintendent, the guidance counselors. There's going to be a lot of complicated issues with English as a second language. So part of the education pathway will also be involved in helping the adults potentially get signed up for ESL classes, get them connected to LitNet, get them connected to other organizations. There are services that are provided through JFS and through other refugee organizations, but things like ESL are better done in person. So part of what Gabrielle is going to be doing is looking to see, are there people in Berkshire County who, I'm totally forgetting the 2 major language groups in Afghanistan. I knew them, I promise I knew them, but it went out of my head. But there are a few people around who may speak those. It's related to Farsi, I know that.
Pashto and Daria.
Thank you, Pashto and Daria. So we may find some people who could do some of that work. Again, employment. Like this person, the people who manage the employment pathway, it's not about necessarily finding the job, but hey, let's look, let's see what's open, let's see, maybe I do know somebody who's going to have a job. Maybe the person who's going to be welcomed into this community is an engineer, maybe they can find some employment that's a better fit for their skills. But again, that's walking with them on that. And then the last piece they call community connection. Part of this will also, community connection, will involve helping them with documentation. So these folks will be eligible for citizenship and the citizenship pathway. That's part of what's attached to the official refugee status, which is great. And that's a little bit further down the line. But so community connection will manage a lot of the softer and social pieces, but then also some of the formal pieces about what it is to be in the community. Again, don't need to do everything, be there to help. So help navigate mass health, help enroll in schools, help navigate documentation. Gabriella Sheehan is the new case manager for Jewish Family Services in Berkshire County. The last I heard, she was going to be based at St. Stephen's in Pittsfield so that she would be alongside the Immigrant Center because the Immigrant Center deals with many of these same types of issues and there will be some synergies. Jewish Family Services, they may also have a separate office over on South Street, so she could be based there, I'm not entirely sure. She told me she was great. She was really great. I had a half an hour conversation with her today. She said, please share my contact information widely. So here it is. Again, the only caveats are she's the only one here. They have a lot to do. So if for whatever reason she doesn't get back to you immediately, don't think she's dropping the ball. So that's okay. I thought it was going to be shorter. It's coming in at 35 minutes. Aces. That's kind of what I have. So for our next steps, we can keep on keeping on. The fundraising is huge. I'm hesitant to say how much we raised at the Silver Tea. I think it's around $1,200. I really don't know. $1,200 for the Silver Tea. I think I did hear from Gail that that there was $415 in the box from the Christmas tree project in the narthex. So let's just estimate low and say we've already raised $1,500, which is halfway, a little under halfway towards that goal of $3,000 to $4,000 to actually help a family get here. Please think about housing. Think if there's anybody that you know who's a second homeowner that could let some people stay even until the summer to buy some time. The first family's coming next week. This is all going to be happening in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then another question that I think we have as a parish is, are there people who feel called to be part of one of these host teams? JFS says that the kind of the core of the commitment is at least 6 to 8 months. So weekly meetings, 6 to 8 months, really walking alongside one of these new families, these new neighbors. If we don't have enough people in the parish to form a host team, that's okay. So like we don't have to do this, and that may not work. But can we partner with another church? I've been trying to get on the calendar for the folks in Lenox for months, having scheduling issues. Maybe between us and St. Anne's, there would be enough people. Or there's a whole other option that we could go down. There are host teams forming as we speak. I think Gabriella said that there were 5 fully formed host teams, mostly from North County. So Williams College has got one organized. St. John's and the UCC Church up there. I think between them and Williams, they actually have 5. There's about another 4 or 5 that are, let's just say, half formed. I know that Knesset Israel and the Baptist Church are working to form a host team as a collaboration. St. Stephen's and Zion are looking to form a host team. The Immigrant Center actually has put together a team. I don't know why I looked at you for that, but sorry about that. Berkshire Immigrant Center has put together a host team. A lot of these other teams are missing 1 or 2 people. So Gabriella said the Immigrant Center team doesn't have anybody who's comfortable doing the healthcare path. So is someone willing to do the healthcare path? The Reverend Nina Pooley up at St. Stephen's said they've got possibly 2 teams between Zion and St. Stephen's, but nobody wants to be the overall coordinator. So if someone's willing to be the overall coordinator, there's some spots. So there's some holes in other teams. So if someone does, if it turns out that 1 family or 2 families or 1 individual at Trinity wants to feels called to do this host team work, it may be that we slot in other places as well. So that's totally an option for us. Nothing wrong with that. That's what I have. So now I'm going to get rid of the slideshow and stop screen sharing, and then see if I can put you guys. Okay, hold on for just a second. Let me see if I can do this. Now everybody can see. All right, so you guys can, actually now you're behind me. So you guys can unmute yourselves if you've got questions, and hopefully everyone will be able to hear. So Sarah, I think you had a question. How many, you know what I should do? I'm gonna do something clever, which is this. So Sarah said, how many families are in the 60 refugees being relocated to Berkshire County? We do not know. We do not know. I doubt it's, grandma and grandpa and their 40 and their 58 children. But we don't know. We don't know what the configuration is. I think that what JFS is planning to do is to kind of work under the assumption that that it'll be family units of like 4 to 6, and then build a number of host teams. So they're looking to try to come up with probably in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 host teams, which will have a sufficient kind of robustness to manage however many families actually do come. So unmute, Jim?
Yeah, Jim Brooke here. A couple quick thoughts. On health, there's a wonderful woman called Cheryl Thompson at Fairview who does access for advocacy for access. She helped me and my wife, who's Cambodian, get health care, health insurance, and she lives and breathes this. So she would be great. Cheryl Thompson at Fairview.
And part of I won't claim the genius, but I'll say the genius on behalf of these aid agencies is by breaking down these pathways into these really specific, manageable nuggets. What we might be able to do is to take the 10 or 12 healthcare pathway leaders and get them all in a meeting with Cheryl. And that way they all know, and that way that information can actually get pushed out really easily. So
tomorrow I'm seeing Ray Elrod, who used to run the BMC, and he is helps run something called Volunteers in Medicine in Great Barrington, which basically is free healthcare, which is good to know about.
right, and so the question for those of you who may not be able to hear it is, what about volunteers in medicine? If they had been coming under a non-refugee status, that would have been absolutely essential. And there were folks who were relocated earlier before the refugee administrative apparatus was in place. They didn't want to put those folks in Berkshire County because we hadn't done that before. In Framingham, they've actually have resettled folks who are under like an asylum seeking legal status, and so we're not eligible for things like mass health. And so the Volunteers in Medicine in Framingham had done that before with folks who were being resettled. They were just hesitant to make this kind of a trial.
Yeah, the other thing, well, two things. First, I have a friend who did maybe 10 visits to Afghanistan and has an empty carriage house apartment. The problem is that he lives basically at the end of the road and you need a car. And at best, the kids can walk down asphalt and get to the school bus. But that's going to be a key component. I bring that up because I'm part of this New York Times alumni Facebook, and the entire New York Times Bureau for Travel is now in Austin, Texas. They need driver's licenses. The Taliban don't know how to run their registered motor vehicles and issue driver's licenses, so they're in a catch-22. They can't get a Texas driver's license because for some reason they can't get some Afghan equivalency.
So for those of you who may not be able to hear, Jim's talking about the challenges of even just getting a driver's license because they weren't being issued by the Taliban. So it's hard.
Yeah, and so it's nice to live the end of your road, but you might want to prioritize, if you have the choices, the people who live on the bus route.
Yeah.
It's certainly a decent bus route, it just, if you're not on that bus route, you gotta drive.
That's so the issue is public transportation, and if so the tension between housing with access to public transportation versus the simple need for housing, full stop. Yeah.
And my final thought is, who knows Afghanistan aside from me a little bit? It's the veterans in the county. Many veterans have been through there.
I'm glad you brought that up.
It's going to be a very easy legislature.
So the last comment Jim mentioned was folks who may have served, veterans who served in Afghanistan. Gabrielle's already working with the veterans of Afghanistan, and they are actually focusing primarily on fundraising for mattresses, bedding, and durable home goods. So that's actually a liaison. Another really important comment that slipped out of my presentation. Gabriella's second call after she got on the job was to the Al Khalifa Islamic Center in Pittsfield. So one of the questions was already where do you get halal food in Berkshire County? I don't know, but I bet you that the folks at the Islamic Center do. So questions from folks at home? Bernadette, you had your hand up a while back. I'm sorry about that. Did the question get answered? Susan, do you have something? Does anybody else have anything?
Excuse me, Mike, somebody needs to stop talking.
Okay, let me see. I think it's here.
And mute themselves because the overtalk is making.
Okay. I think I got it. Yeah. Anything? Does anyone else have anything?
Michael?
Gail.
Gail, this is Gail. My question is about the children. Is there, if we want to educate the children, we want to get them into the schools, there's got to be a language barrier. Is there any way we know that interpreters can go with them and teach them?
So the question is will there be interpreters for kids in schools? I think the answer is probably going to be no. There just aren't that many Pashto and Malawi interpreters. So that's going to be a thing. It's absolutely a thing. Again, I think for kids in particular, there will probably be some online ESL offerings to help kind of bring them along as quickly as possible. This is another thing which is great about them having the official refugee status, because it means that they will trigger all of the legal requirements that the public schools have to educate all children. So I hate to say it's not our problem, because we'll be doing our best to help out, but there are educators for whom this is what they do, and we'll be able to let those professionals do their job. Bernadette, you got something?
In answer to Gail's question, hi Gail. The way it has worked before with waves of refugees, and I have only worked through the Jesuit Refugee Service to be the point person to settle 20,000 homes and Laotians in Seattle, and then about 15,000 Vietnamese and Laotians on the Texas coast. Is that the younger children, Gail, are just put in immersion. They're simply put into the classroom. For older children, starting at around 10, there usually are after-school English as a second language courses, but they're put in, meaning there are no interpreters. And the thinking on educating folks as English as a second language is that you don't use interpreters. That it is best to use. There's a whole curriculum under ESL. I now teach three Filipinos out of the sanctuary in Hudson, New York, and the schools do it pretty much the same. That's just the best way to do it. I know the curriculum. I have no professional input into it because I just use the curriculum. I am not a person who is competent to construct the curriculum, but it does work. It really does work. And Michael, on another point, I made a very quick check this afternoon to go back and look at the law. State Department law still is very clear. You have to have 1 year of stable housing before refugees are released from lily pads. And I'm unsure how family is coming to Pittsburgh with only 6 months.
I can only tell you what I heard from Gabriella today. So the question of stable housing and whether or not they can release into temporary housing. Again,
that's very, very interesting. The other thing is, why is there not a better, more articulated effort to start raising money to be put into a fund to pay for rent as opposed to all these household goods? It's easier to pick up a donation for something like a refrigerator later
great question to ask Gabriella. That is beyond my pay grade. And again, I've been
Something that we might consider doing with our money?
conceivably, but again, at this point, I'm looking to defer to Gabriella. And if she says this is where the needs are currently, then that's where I'm leaning towards.
Well, where did you get the list that started with housing and went down to community connection? Because housing was the first one, and I thought that was a prioritized list.
The
I misunderstand.
That list comes from the host team guidelines, what it is. So I think in terms of, as I understand it, and again, this is a question for Gabriella, but as I understand it, the two issues with housing are both locating it, paying for it, and making sure that there's something there. It may be as simple as most organizations find it easier to raise funds for household goods, and because it feels concrete, and so they're willing to let the cash reserves and other fundraising go towards rent and payments, and to use communities like houses of worship to take care of other pieces, just because it's a little bit easier. So, Susan, you had a question?
My question is, have you heard anything about the attempts to contact the Massachusetts bar to get a special volunteer committee of lawyers who are excused from certain types of liability to help and give legal advice with regard to leases?
I'm not familiar with that. I would assume that, and not what I would assume. I know that there are a couple of attorneys who are already emerging in some of the host teams. And then also that that's exactly, I think, the kind of work that Jewish Family Services is going to be doing. They would be the ones to make that outreach to the Massachusetts bar. Susan.
I'm thinking of all the really, really challenging opportunities here for volunteers. But I would like to put in a plug for people from Trinity to volunteer as lit tutors, because they provide such excellent preparation and training for volunteers, and make it very easy to work even with people who have no English at all. They have an excellent curriculum, and I can, in all the things that you listed, I don't see myself in any of those roles, but I can certainly see myself again as a tutor, because that's a very rewarding thing to do, and especially since there may be older people in the group, or in the immigrants, or the grandparent ages and that sort of thing, who are likely to be the last to be able to cope with English. So I don't know where we do, at what point we volunteer to do that, or whether we specifically do that, or how other processes. But I think that would be very worthwhile for a number of us to do. It would not be, that would be within our scope.
Thank you, Susan. So, and LitNet was listed by Gabriella as one of the key folks that we would be looking to work with. I think there are three organizations that do things like this. One in Pittsfield, one in North County as well.
Well, there's the Adult Learning Center in Pittsfield, there's LitNet in Louisville, but BCC also has an ESOL program. And there used to be an ESOL program in MCLA, but I don't know now.
So Eleanor's reminding us that there's some really good programs at BCC and some good ESL programs. So we're not completely devoid of resources in Berkshire County.
As a matter of fact, I think that's one thing that we have to keep in mind, that while we don't have a lot of immigrants in Berkshire County, we have a very strong network that supports. You mentioned the Berkshire Immigrant Center, the Volunteers in Medicine, LitNet. And I would say also Latinas 413, because it's an immigrant group that I think, has already resourced themselves. But I think we are lucky to have these neighbors coming our way, and they're lucky to come to us because we already have a lot of avenues. And as you were saying, Jim, right?
Jim.
When it comes to healthcare, volunteers in medicine or BMC, there's already expertise, and the Berkshire Immigrant Center knows them very well.
Yep.
So we're lucky, or they're lucky.
Oh, let me see if there's any other questions over here real quick. Any other questions from folks who are at home?
Yes, Michael,
Gail?
thank you. We could not understand,
Okay, Eleanor was saying that although there are not an enormous number of immigrants in Berkshire County, there are actually a lot of pathways, and there are a lot of really robust organizations like Volunteers in Medicine, like the Berkshire Immigrant Center, and we do actually have some experience with welcoming people into our community. I think it's probably a little bit of the kind of the small town values of New England that kind of grow into these sorts of institutions.
thank you.
Jim, you were saying?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment. I think the language skills, and my wife, by the way, is being taught or tutored by LitNet, which is a great group of people. I think the language skills will be fairly good in English. Many of these people are translators, and if they dealt with the U.S. military, they had to speak English, and they couldn't get by in the local language. And English was sort of lingua franca thanks to the British colonial period in India and Pakistan and to some degree in Afghanistan. So the person who had contact with the U.S. government and military was speaking English. These are probably from the middle class of Kabul, and so they would have been teaching their children English, and especially their translators, and that's what translators do. The problem may be if they were able to bring up their parents, their grandparents, their language abilities would be not good. So I think that would be, the immersion would probably work very well in those sort of schools. It'd be very hard to find someone who speaks these languages in the county. I go back to the isolation issue where, yeah, there may be a partner waiting for them at the end of your road, but they need a car, they need a U.S. driver's license, they need, ideally somewhere in Pittsfield or Great Barrington, Lee, where they can, walk to the bus, walk to the jobs, walk to the supermarket.
Susan?
I'm hearing a lot of very interesting observations on how immigration works. And Gail seems to have given us, or you, a very large laundry list of things that could be done. We have a time frame, and I gather we have a family, one family coming in, with the potential for more families coming in to the county, north and south. And that I'm not sure quite exactly what is being asked of us.
What is being,
Right? She is point.
what,
Jewish family services, they are the points.
absolutely. What we're being asked to do, so I thank you for sort of boiling it down. What we're being asked to do is to go home and pray and ask the question, is God asking me to work with these folks? And if so, how? Is it through fundraising? Is it through helping out when I can? Is it through walking alongside one of these families on one of these pathways? And that may be a way that our vocations as disciples of Christ flourish. It may not be. It's a vocation. It's okay. We don't have to do these things. And whatever we do.
Right at the moment I'm hearing through, which is we can fundraise.
Yep.
Because we know that there's fiscal needs everywhere. We can offer to assist perhaps a host group or just our hands on a nominal level. Or we could make a larger time frame commitment to participate in a host group, either by joining one or by attempting to initiate one within ourselves.
Exactly. If
Okay.
over the next 48 hours, 12 people across at least 6 families come to me and say, we feel called to be part of the host team, I would say, oh, we've got enough people. Let's see who wants to do this. If we get 3, if 3 folks say, I think this is what I'm supposed to do, then I might say, okay, I'm going to funnel you over to Gabriella. She's going to incorporate you into some other teams. You'll make some new friends along the way. Everything's great. That's totally an option. I think that the key here is that we're being asked to do something in a positive direction. Whatever we do is going to be gratefully understood and gratefully received. What we've already done is great. If individuals want to do other things or more or in other ways, we can hook them up to do that. But it's important to sort of lay this out. There is one other task for everybody who's here on the Zoom or in person, and that has to do with questions of language. So these folks that are coming in, again, back before their legal status changed to refugees, they had this terrible designation called humanitarian parolee. Never use that word. Parolee was the word. Ugh. No, don't ever use that word. At worst, use refugee, because that's accurate. And they are refugees. But that doesn't boil down their experience. You could also call them evacuees, because we had to evacuate them. But I think maybe the best way to talk about these folks is to call them our neighbors. And these are people who are coming into our community, and they're going to be our neighbors. It's also important for you guys to know, as you go out and talk to your friends, and you interact with people or have lunch with people, and it comes up, these folks who are coming are not taking services away from people who are in Berkshire County. They're just not. They're coming with their own rights, their own privileges, their own benefits. And it's completely distinct. So this will have zero impact on the homeless community or the food insecure community in Berkshire County. This is nothing to do with that. So those are just really important, kind of really broad pieces. So as you bleed into the community, you can present this sense of welcome. In my prayer at the beginning, I talked about the sojourner, and Leviticus is a challenging book of the Bible for a whole bunch of reasons. And every once in a while, you get somebody who's like, it's awful, you gotta throw out Leviticus. We can't throw out Leviticus because there's too much good stuff in there too. So one of the verses in Leviticus is, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's great. But like 6 verses later, it says, you shall love the sojourner as yourself. So the people who come into the community, who are forced to come into the community, are to be loved as deeply as we love our own being. And that is, I heard Rabbi Josh talking about this a million years ago, and he had a great quote. He said, Jesus was a good rabbi. He knew his scripture. He knew that 3 verses later, it says this. So this is part of what we do as disciples of Christ. These people are sojourners. They're becoming our neighbors. And we are called to love them as we love our own selves and our own being. How we express that love, that's the invitation that we have. Susan?
One more question.
Yes.
This goes back to something that I raised in the last meeting, and I did not it has not come up. And that has to do with whether there has been any contact with the Islamic Center that is in Pittsfield, and to make sure
I did answer that question. I did say that. Gabriella has already spoken to Saul, as have I. Yes, the Islamic Center is going to be absolutely key. No one could really talk to Salim until Gabriella landed on scene. I suspect that Salim was one of her first 5 calls. Issues of how to get them into prayers, how to incorporate them into a worshiping community, how to let them continue to practice their faith. And that was why the question, like, where is the halal grocery store in Berkshire County? I don't know, but the Al Khalifa Islamic Center in Pittsfield knows. So yeah, they're, what's that?
Well, if you go to the Jewish Family Services site in Springfield to see what you can donate, which I did, and it flags you into an Amazon site.
And there's halal food is on the Amazon list?
And it tells you how many they might need. And me being me, I said, well, they need 15 prayer rugs, and I don't think the prayer rugs they have in Canada. So online, I found a great place in Broadbrook, Connecticut, called which is kind of like this Marshalls for Arabic goods. It was really wonderful. The guy was great. I sent an email to Jewish Family Services, said, look at my shop outside of your list, is that going to screw up your count? And I got a very nice young woman who was assisting, called me back. She said, not at all. We're taking whatever you can find, wherever you can find it. So I sent them 10 prayer rugs the other day, but now I guess I'm going to have to send a few more because it seems like there could be 60 here. But
We'll see, we'll have to find out.
They're open for your cups.
They,
they're all different, so that when they come in, they have an option. They have a way of picking them. If you were to have ordered them from Amazon, they were ready.
they're all the same. So it's 7:05, so if there's no other burning questions, I'd like to close it out with another prayer. Let us pray. Loving God, we are all on a journey to come to our proper homes. Help us as we discern our ministry and vocations as disciples of Christ, called to love those among us and our neighbors. Help us to welcome these new people into their new homes as we all journey into our true home. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, Michael.
If you did.
Thank you.
Take a piece of paper. You know, also email me a copy so I can read that.
That slide deck? Or the,
Well,
okay.
yeah,
sure.
so I can use it.
Yeah, I should mention. Yeah,
That's
the,
fine, I can contact.
no, this is their standard form. I can email you the slide deck too. Okay.
Okay, good. Thanks for doing that.
Rabbinical story, I know you've heard it, somebody sort of saying, 613 or 513 mitzvot, it's so much, what do you do? And I'm like, pick one and start there. And, you know, we don't have 613 or 513, but there's a lot of, you know, acronyms and hosts and what to do, but I think, I was going to ask, and then I thought, I can't do it. But I was going to ask, no, seriously, but you said you're taking off your priest hat, putting on your civics hat, and that was a good metaphor. But I was going to say, put your priest hat back on now.
Yeah.
How do you sense, and I think Susan kind of teased that out in a more collaborative way, but how do you sense the spirit hovering over you? And I'm not even I'm just saying, maybe that's a homiletical reflection. I mean, I think it's something more than just a, coffee house conversation.
It's the right thing to do, yeah.
I think, or the right thing to do. I mean, I really think the question is, what kind of charism is there here?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that. You do.
Yeah, I don't know.
What are the charism? I mean, there's a lot of talent.
As much as I would love to see Trinity host a team,
I don't think that.
we don't have it. We don't have it. We don't have enough
We're on the road.
people to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's fair or if somebody would team with me, I would love to do it in a sense of my hearing won't allow me, especially if there's any accent, for me to interpret.
Right.
But if I had a team member,
Yep.
and we became, we were,
One
two of us
member.
became one team member.
Yeah.
I would certainly offer my services.
Yeah.
And what would those services be? Just what specifically would you be bringing to it?
Well,
I'm not
the thing
challenging,
about
I'm
it
just
is,
saying.
I was gonna go
Nursing?
home, I was gonna go home and ask Karen if she wanted to be a team member and possibly do help, but Karen, obviously her biggest, her, talent sits with, literacy.
Literacy, you know?
But she basically said that's being addressed.
Well, they always need.
They always need, yeah,
literacy.
it's, I mean, just because there's organizations that do it, doesn't mean that people don't need to do it.
One of the people we really should be tapping right now is Andrew Cavalier.
Andrew Chevalier, yeah.
And hopefully, he was going to be on.
He was on. I saw him on. I think if there's a challenge, it's that families with kids are going to be real stretched for this. You know, when I talked to Gabriella, he said, you know, the two demographics that are the unicorns that we're looking for are the late 50s empty nesters with extra time and
Right.
capacity, or the 67-year-old recently retired, with people who have time. And there just aren't that many folks who fit that profile. I mean, yeah, you're one of them, like somebody who has capacity, has some energy, has some time. But when you look across the parish, you know, it's a couple. Now, and again, if we're talking about, I mean, let's say I can convince my wife, you know, you and me and Andrew and someone else, you know, 4 people might be able to fill 2 slots. That could work. We could do something like that. You know, that might actually work.
Let me know.
Yeah, I will.
I will definitely, but please, Michael, recognize I do the best I possibly can when it comes to all the Zooming and everything else. But you can't totally hold me responsible for what's being said unless I get to say, hey, Michael, I really didn't get that.
Right. I think that one of the key, because they've done a really good job of breaking this down into manageable chunks.
They did, really.
And this is actually not how they do it. This is.
Is this the letter?
Yep,
Can we
this is the
take
letter.
that?
Yep.
Can I take an extra one? Just-
Take as many as you want.
I really honestly think Karen Joyner would absolutely love
That's
to
true.
be part of this.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think, she's definitely Trinity,
Yep.
so.
They usually don't let members of the general public interact with refugees. That's usually like they control access. They've shifted to this model because it's so many all at once. So then they've really tried to prescribe the way. Now that said, when you get down to the really manageable pieces, it might be as simple as driving people to appointments. That's a huge, because as Jim said, transportation is going to be an issue. So if you've got these 5 pathways, and you've got, let's say, 2 people in each one, well, anytime I can't do it, you can. And that's just for doctor's appointments. And Karen and somebody else are driving them to lawyers' visits. And there's just, and so that's the shared calendar piece and just making sure that everything's organized. Yeah, it's clever. That way you have potentially 7, 8 people. And then if neither of us can do it, someone can pick up our shift.
Exactly, it's covered.
Exactly.